print, email, Facebook, Twitter. More Shannon Bennett staff lost their tips if they broke things or failed tests. Ex-employees say former employees of celebrity chef Shannon Bennett say their share of tip money was regularly confiscated by managers for breakages, being late to work, or getting answers wrong in a so-called tip test. The allegations follow reports earlier this month of widespread underpayment of staff at View Group venues, including at the flagship restaurant View du Monde. The Fair Work Ombudsman has since launched an investigation into those claims. Those reports prompted other former employees to come forward, saying they were not only underpaid, but that the tip money they relied on to supplement their incomes was regularly taken from them by managers. "It just felt like they were trying anyway to get rid of our tips," said Sally, a former waiter who quit her job at Melbourne's View du Monde earlier this year. "Most of the tips went to the managers. If we came in 1 minute late, they took our tips," she said. "If you didn't have good enough knowledge of the venue, or about Shannon Bennett, then you would lose tips." The ABC has seen an internal email requiring staff to take the tip test. Another email confirmed the restaurant had a 3-strike system for late arrivals, with the loss of a week's tips as the penalty. Several other former View staff alleged that tips were also confiscated to cover breakages. Brandon DiFiglio, who was a chef at View Group from 2013 to 2015 and now works in Los Angeles, said, "If the chefs broke a Kona coffee percolator, the whole station wouldn't get their tips that week." Jamie, who was a chef at Bistro View until 2012, remembers being penalized after a shelf broke. "I can remember going into the cool room. I took something off a shelf, and the whole shelf fell down," Jamie said. "About 10 or 15 plates broke, and the response was, 'No tips for 6 months.'" In a statement, View Group conceded that a small percentage of tip money is allocated to cover the cost of breakages, in accordance with standard industry practice. But it did not respond to questions about the tip test, or whether tips were from staff who had 3 strikes being late to work. Others have also claimed they were required to work long hours of unpaid overtime. For Martina Ricci, worked double shifts alone on the ground floor of the Rialto Tower, greeting restaurant guests before they took the elevator 55 floors up to View du Monde. She says she struggled to get a break, even to go to the toilet. "When I asked for my break, or 10 minutes to go to the toilet, they always said, 'Stop drinking so much water, we don't have anyone to replace your position.' No such thing as a free meal." Mr. Bennett is one of Australia's most successful chefs. His original View du Monde restaurant has spawned numerous new projects under the View Group banner. He is a regular guest on TV's MasterChef, and last year bought a $17 million house in the Melbourne suburb of Toorak. Even those staff who were bitter at the way they were treated at View Group restaurants maintain respect for Mr. Bennett's skills and achievements, and say they also remember him as the encouraging mentor figure they see on MasterChef. "He is the only boss I've ever worked for who will come to everybody, shake their hand, and ask them how they are," Sally said. "When you're working that hard, and the big boss acknowledges you as a person, that makes you feel fantastic." Jamie said Mr. Bennett would eat dinner with the staff every night, but claims there was a downside. "When I worked it all out, I was effectively working for $5 an hour. We got a signed cookbook and a half bottle of Moet for Christmas as a reward," the former chef said. "We got fed 1 meal a day and he made sure it was a good one. It was great for morale. But he would also rip shreds off his staff, and in front of all the other staff. It was humiliating." No tips because of Dirty Apron. Former View du Monde chef Edward Sison says he remembers Mr. Bennett coming into the kitchen before a dinner service, furious at having found a dirty apron. Shannon held up the apron and said, "Whose is this?" No one owned up. Shannon says, "Okay, you can forget about your tips for the next month." He looked at me, and said, "What?" I said, "Nothing, chef." Mr. Sison alleges he was sacked after an argument with Mr. Bennett over pay, after his wages were docked for not attending trade school on his day off, even though the school was closed for the term break. I said, "This is absolute bullshit. I deffing had it. I never let loose on anyone like I did then, and he sacked me on the spot. I didn't even know how I was going to pay my rent that week." In the statement to the ABC, View Group denies Mr. Bennett withheld tips from the kitchen staff, or that Ms. Ritchie was denied toilet breaks. It said Mr. Bennett has not publicly humiliated staff members in front of their colleagues. Mr. Sison now works in Chile, where he cooks for the Australian Embassy in Santiago. He said the industry back home in Australia was not right at the moment. I don't know if that's because there is so much competition in Melbourne, if it's because there's so much going on, so much variety that everyone's trying to get ahead. I get that, but at the same time, you want to be getting ahead in the right way, I think. Some names have been changed: print, email, Facebook, Twitter, more.